Hello and welcome to this audiobook recording of an Overlord side story known as Emissary of the King. I'm Corpse Shepherd, and I will serve as the voice of the narrator in the story, as well as other roles. This side story happens between Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the novel, or for anime fans out there, it happens after Ainz has saved Karn Village, but before he assumes the role of the adventurer, Momon. It was released as special bonus content with the first Overlord Blu-ray. Before we begin, I would like to thank the translator Nigel and the editor and proofreaders who helped him produce the original story in English. I would also like to thank everyone who contributed their voice, editing time, or even efforts to organize it. Thank you. Thank you for making this possible. Please excuse the audio quality for the first two parts. It is my intention to remaster them at a higher quality, but for now, please enjoy Emissary of the King. Part 1. Space distorted, and the view before his eyes changed instantly. Upon returning to his room with its grand desk, Ainz sighed in relief. He had teleported many times before, and he knew that there should not be any problems this time around. But he had only been in this unknown world for a few days. Thus, the fear that he might teleport to some strange place still worried him. He caressed the ring of Ainz-Ulgon on his right ring finger and looked around him. There was nobody around. That was good. He did not want anyone to see what he was about to do. Ainz was about to walk towards the table when he stopped and looked up. He possessed magic vision which could see through invisibility, and noticed the figures of the 8-edge assassins standing by on the ceiling. Their gazes met. No! Ainz might not know which direction their composite eyes were looking at, but he was probably not mistaken by feeling their eyes meeting. He felt troubled by others looking at him, although that might just be Ainz being overly self-conscious. All of you, leave! In response to Ainz's declaration, one of the 8-edge assassins, who was probably their leader, answered. Pardon my impudence, Ainz-sama. There might be intruders who would make an attempt on your life here. To avoid this tiny possibility, please allow us to stay here and serve as your shield. Please reconsider. Intruders? Here? I can only take this as an insult to the ones guarding the 8 floors above me. Ah! That is not what your humble servant is implying. Please forgive my transgression. However, if something were to happen to the last supreme being who stayed with us, that would be our shared responsibility. To consider all the possibilities and dangers, and to protect the supreme beings, is the duty of everyone here. We will shut our eyes, mouths, and ears, and protect your majestic self while hiding in the shadows. It mentioned something about hiding in the shadows, but to Ainz, the bug-shaped monsters were just hanging prominently on the ceiling. He understood their wish to serve, but he couldn't allow others to know what he was going to do next. He suddenly realized what he felt was similar to a 14-year-old boy who wanted to lock his own room. Rejected! I will be conducting a secret ritual in this room. This is a secret amongst secrets that absolutely no one can witness. I trust all of you, but I want to minimize the risk of this leaking out. These are my words as the great ruler of the tomb of Nazarick. Understand? I hear and obey. We have no objections, since this is the will of a supreme being. The 8-edge assassins descended from the ceiling. They detached their legs from the surface above them, and fell to the ground. They landed without any noise and stood up as one. We will retreat from this room now. After Ainz nodded, they left the room elegantly in a disciplined line. For some reason, this reminded of Ainz of that nature documentary clip of ants marching in a single line, shown to him by Blue Planet. After the last of them had left the room and bowed to Ainz from the corridor, they closed the door gently. Ainz scanned his surrounding once more. The ceiling as well, of course. No one was around. The room was truly empty now. There were 2 sets of doors in this room. One was used by the 8-edge assassins, which led into the corridor, while the other was linked to the personal rooms, Ainz' personal chambers, which comprised of several rooms like the royal suites and hotels, such as a bedroom, a changing room, and a bathroom, all connected together. Ainz walked towards the door leading to the other rooms and opened it easily. He poked his head and looked inside. There was no sign of anyone else. Even if he listened closely, he still couldn't hear the sound of another person. He thought that maybe a maid might be cleaning the other rooms, but that didn't seem to be the case. No, he couldn't let his guard down. Ainz let go of his relaxation and tensed up once again. Walking across the room, Ainz opened the door leading to the next corridor. On either side of the door were bipedal insect-type monsters assigned by Cocytus, standing by as sentries. He didn't see any signs of the 8-edge assassins. They couldn't have gone far, but they were not here.
"The 2 of you." "Sir!" "Ainz-sama, what are your orders?"
Stopping his minions, who were about to kneel down to show their fealty, Ainz asked them,
"How long have you been standing guard here?"
"Sir, 25 hours. No, it's 25 hours and 40 minutes.
Ainz blinked his non-existent eyes.
Yes?
He could tell that his minions were troubled. Ainz was certain of it. This was nothing to be happy about, but his skill at reading the expressions of insects had been rising rapidly. It would be a good thing if his observation skills improved, but if that wasn't the case, it would be a useless ability. No. There were insectoid monsters led by Cocytus under his charge. This should be a very useful ability for the ruler of Nazarick. The thoughts that arose in a corner of his brain that he wasn't even sure existed were dismissed by his rage. Now wasn't the time to consider all these things. He should be thinking about the inhuman working conditions of these servants instead. He let a weak-sounding slip out and tried covering it up with a clumsy cough. Then Ainz questioned his servants. "I ask you again, you said it's been 1 day?"
"That is so.
It has been 1 day since we were bestowed the honor of serving sentry duty before Ainz-sama's room." Is that so? 1 day. You're on Cocytus's orders, I presume?
"Yes, Ainz-sama."
Standing sentry for an entire day without relief. This would put any unethical company to shame. Ainz was speechless as he thought about Cocytus. His last farewell with Hero was still fresh on his mind. If Hero hadn't been run ragged from work and was healthily and mentally fresh, he might be standing here with Ainz right now. How could he allow his own subordinates to be forced in such a situation? The same situation which robbed Hero of all his vitality. Ainz's job took a lot of his time, but at least he had time to play virtual games. There were many who gave up gaming because of the drastic change in their living environment. Hero didn't cancel his account, but he was as good as retired, and if that wasn't the case, he wouldn't have left his items behind and told Ainz that he was free to do whatever he wanted with them. As he fumed silently, Ainz announced, "Carrying out your duties over such long hours without rest must have taken a toll on you. Your hard work is worthy of praise. You may hand your duties over to your replacements, so go back and rest. If Cocytus says anything to you, tell them that these are my orders." However, the reaction from his subordinates was completely different from what he expected.
Could it be that we did something wrong?
What? No, you didn't do anything wrong.
Their voices were trembling, but it wasn't because of confusion, but due to some other reason. This made Ainz furrow the eyebrows in his heart.
Was Cocytus that scary?
While Ainz was considering that possibility, the servants continued.
If that's so, why are you ordering us to stand down and hand over our duties?
The pitiful pleas of his servants baffled Ainz once again.
Why? Do you even need to ask? Keeping the same posture while standing sentry for 25 hours must be very tiring, no?
No such thing. There is nothing tiring about this. Being assigned to guard Ainz-sama's room is a heavenly experience for us. Are you sure you're not about to ascend to heaven because of fatigue?
He thought to himself.
No, that... You won't be able to concentrate like this. I think changing shifts routinely would ensure tighter security, right?
Please, do not worry. When we were dispatched here, Cocytus-sama loaded us an item allowing us to operate without a need for sleep. Being assigned to the important post of guarding Ainz-sama's room makes us happy. We can't afford to let our guard down.
Ainz could feel the determination of their voices.
Is that so? Do your best in your assigned tasks, then.
He might be shaken, but Ainz still nodded with the attitude of a true master.
We are extremely grateful, Ainz-sama.
He was thinking that he should be the one thanking them, but as their master, Ainz couldn't say that. However, there was something that he should say.
Thank you, and good work.
Yes!
Thank you, and good work. A member of society who didn't use these two terms appropriately would be a failure.
Before you carry out your duties, let me ask you this. While I was away today, did anyone enter my chambers?
No one entered today. Only Sebas-sama, the maids, and Albedo-sama stopped by the rooms. But after learning that Ainz-sama was away, none of them left any messages and went on their way.
He felt curious about why they came in the first place, but that wasn't the issue right now.
I understand. Let me confirm this once more. No one entered the room, correct?
Yes!
It was safe inside the room, then. He had asked them everything he wanted to know.
Don't push yourselves too hard, and carry on the good work.
Ainz closed the door as he listened to the spirited response from the two of them. He made his way through the rooms once more and sat himself onto a chair. Ainz scanned his surroundings again. Even though he knew that no one was around, he still looked around carefully. What he was about to do was very crucial and could not be seen by anyone. Ainz regretted a little about not learning more information-type spells and began casting several defensive spells. He felt like he might be worrying too much, but this required the utmost care. After finishing all of his preparations, Ainz opened his item window, or rather, the space where he stored his items, and took out the things he wanted. After infiltrating the library, he had used several concealment spells, and brought out several books in absolute secrecy. He retrieved one and placed it on a table. He retrieved one and placed it on the table. He retrieved one and placed it on the table. He retrieved one and placed it on the table. He repeated this action 12 times. The volumes were all quite thick and formed a tower on the table.
I messed up.
Ainz realized his mistake as he let out a tiny sigh of regret. There were too many. If it was just the elder Lich Chief Librarian, it would have been rather simple to evade his eyes. But hiding from the Overlord's senses, the highest placed class of undead, was extremely difficult. For Ainz, who lacked many special infiltration abilities, running into any of the 5 overlords would have meant that he would have been discovered. That's why he had to use this rare chance to take all the books out. However, it would take a lot of time to finish reading all of these. So what do? I don't have a place to put these. It would be troublesome if they were discovered. It would be easy to hide one piece of paper, but it was a different matter for hiding a small pile of books. Not much time had passed since he came to this world, so Ainz' table wasn't a mess like the desk that Suzuki Satoru had in his company. It was kept neat and tidy, without anything unnecessary on it. As Ainz was about to open his drawers and put the books inside, he stopped. There shouldn't be any subordinates who would open Ainz' drawers, but was that really true? In the experience of Suzuki Satoru, the salaryman, there were rude people who would nonchalantly open other people's drawers. Where else could he keep them? He came up with plans to stash them in his bedroom, the changing room, the bathroom, and all the other rooms, but there was always a chance that the maid cleaning these rooms could find them. His mother had passed away very early on in his life, so he hadn't experienced this before, but there were guild members who returned to their room to find porn collections neatly displayed on their tables. This turned their mind blank. According to them, the absolute worst thing is that their mothers didn't even say a word during dinner, even though they were staring each other face to face. It was a second-hand account, but Ainz could empathize with how they felt. Even though his undead body was resilient to powerful psychological attacks, he was reluctant to suffer that kind of pain. In that case, I can only place it here. Ainz opened his space and placed the books back inside once more. Considering that the books were very low-level items, it was easy for information-type magic spells, or those with thief-type classes, to read the book titles in his inventory. That's why Ainz didn't want to carry them on him. But it was the only way, because it was also the safest method. He stored the books one by one, and only 2 were left in the end. Those books' titles were The Secret of Building Trust with One's Subordinates, and Things That Hated Bosses Don't Do. These 2. The copyright on these works had expired, having been published over 70 years ago. Ainz sat before the table and looked one of the books up, and started browsing through the pages. The contents of these business books had strongly influenced Suzuki Satoru, the salaryman. I see. That's true. If only there were bosses like that. Ainz spoke these words unconsciously as he read. As he focused on digesting the wisdom within, he sighed in admiration. This is great. To think that there could be such a good business book. Suzuki Satoru didn't really read that many business books. He wasn't too passionate about his salaryman job and didn't have anyone he could call his subordinates. Naturally, he had no intention of understanding the mentality of a boss. However, he was no longer a small-time employee, but as the ruler of the great tomb of Nazarick. Using the positions in a company as an example, he had to run the organization as the president. Willing to take responsibility, open and straightforward, easygoing and calm, accepts opinions humbly. The ideal boss. But it was easy for anyone to talk about theory. The ones who put these to actual practice were few and far between. That was why there were so few competent bosses, despite the existence of such excellent business books. Ainz, who knew about these things called bosses, made a bitter face. In reality, they tended to be far removed from their idealized forms. Ainz, who had almost fallen into deep musing, shook his head and purged the hardships of the world from his mind. Right now, he shouldn't be agonizing over the gap between the ideal and reality. Instead, as Ainz-sama, he had to earn the trust of the NPCs and work hard to be a great ruler. Ainz's gaze fell upon the book once more, with these new thoughts in mind. There was much that was written on it, but it wasn't something that he could digest in one sitting. This required dedicated work over a long period of time. That was the only way that Ainz could become everyone's ideal boss. However, that would take a long time to do. To a starving man, 10,000 yen right now was more valuable than 100 million yen a few years later. So what should I do? Although it was too early to worry about finishing even a single book, as an undead, Ainz had no need for rest or sleep. He still had some remnants of humanity left and would feel mental fatigue, but he could keep working for 24 hours straight if he had to, which meant that if he wanted to spend the entire day reading, he could finish the book within the day. However, browsing through 10 lines at a time meant that he would miss some points. It wasn't a bad idea to absorb the essence of all these books before making his move. However, could he really digest all these materials in one day? Unfortunately, Suzuki Sartoru just didn't have the opportunity to pursue higher education, so the knowledge that he gained from interacting with the world and others was biased. If someone like that was to read 10 books a day, would he even be able to make sense of all these concepts? It was fine since he hadn't even finished these 2 books yet, but if he was to absorb knowledge from multiple books, situations where the contents from different books contradicted each other would surely arise. That would be out of his league. Would it be better to do something now before he became confused? Ainz looked up into the sky, trapped in the maze of his own thoughts. Right now he was eager to try out what he had just learned and act immediately. But then another issue presented itself. What part of the book should he even reference, and what should he do with what he had learned? He flipped through the book that he was reading, letting the pages turn rapidly. The moment he reached a certain page, inspiration struck like a bolt of lightning, electrifying Ainz's non-existent brain. He turned back to that page in a hurry and started reading in earnest. The page was about conversation with one's subordinates, the pros and cons of asking them about their troubles and worries. Some subordinates kept things to themselves because they were reluctant to discuss it with their superiors. That was why superiors should be proactive and ask them about their problems. Ainz nodded as if he found a way in. This was it. This was definitely it. A heart-to-heart talk. I need to ask if anything is troubling them. It would be bad if anyone fell into a depression because they had to hold it all in. This reminded Ainz of the drained figure of Hero that he saw before coming into this new world. The NPCs might be feeling uneasy right now, since they had just been transferred to this world. A debuff known as Fear existed in Yggdrasil. Hence, it could be treated with spells and abilities. However, there was no debuff called Troubled. In that case, it might not be curable by magic. There was no telling if a debuff existed, but he should plan for the worst-case scenario and act on it. He didn't want the NPCs to be like Hero. When Ainz made up his mind, he started thinking about his next move. Nazarick was vast and had a large population. Even if he excluded the lower-tiered servants and the automatically spawned monsters, there was still a large number of NPCs. It would take too much time to talk to each one individually. No, even so, he should do so anyways for the sake of the NPCs. As the last one to stay behind, Ainz had to take up the duty of his guild members as well. He would try it with a few people first, observe how it went, and then talk to other people later. Next, it would be whom he should choose to first talk with. And Ainz came up with an answer immediately. Besides the floor guardians, who were responsible for all sorts of important jobs, who else would be an excellent choice for this task? As for his first choice, Ainz already had somebody in mind. Ainz stood up from his seat and issued the order to the 2 guards outside to summon a certain man. End of part 1.